The most common name nobody knows.
It's common knowledge that Muhammad is the most popular name on earth. Well, actually, Muhammad is. No, wait, Muhammad is. Or is it Muhammad? Okay, you get the idea. This is a
lot of
very
Muslims
common
have
name,
it.
no matter
What
how
up,
it's
Zix?
spelled. For its popularity, Muhammad can thank religion.
Quran.
It comes from the Prophet Muhammad, who founded the religion of Islam. Well, more specifically, the name comes from the Arabic verb hamada, meaning to praise, and so the name essentially means praiseworthy. After Islam spread, it became a tradition for many families to name their firstborn after the Prophet, and with a population of 1.8 billion people within the Muslim faith, the second largest religious group in the world, this has resulted in an estimated 150 million men bearing the name in one form or another. But there is one religion larger than Islam, and that's Christianity, which has an additional 600 million people following. So how come there's no Christian name to rival Muhammad? Well, as it turns out, there just might be. And this name is Yohanan. If you just thought to yourself you've never...
I never heard of this name. Yohanan?
Heard this name before in your life, well, you'd be wrong. But let's learn where it came from first. This name got its start in Hebrew and is actually the shortened version of the name, however that's pronounced. But this version preserved the two essential...
Bro said, I wonder if Osama is a rare name. Yo, you crazy.
Parts of the name. Yo, referring to Yahweh, the Hebrew name for God,
Yahweh?
and Hanan, which means to be gracious. So Yohanan means God is gracious. Of course, just like Muhammad, except way more so, Yohanan has become the subject to changes in both spelling and pronunciation across many different cultures. Although originally Hebrew, the name really became popular due to Christianity, as two very important figures in the Bible share this name. As Christianity spread out of the Middle East, one of the first places it became established was the Roman Empire. The name came to Rome via Greece, where it became Johannes, and then came into Roman Latin as Johannes. For a long time, Christianity existed as a cult, and practicing Christians were persecuted throughout the Roman Empire. But eventually, in 306...
Huh? I said cult? What up, Kevin?
6 CE, Emperor Constantine came into power and became the first Roman emperor to convert to the religion. This paved the way for the faith and therefore the name to spread throughout Europe. And with each leap into new cultures and languages, the name changed just a little more. The further away the name got geographically, the more it changed linguistically. A good example would be Johannes' journey to England. Leaving Rome, Johannes entered Germanic language and became Johans. Moving into France, this became Johann and eventually Jehan. Reaching England, Jehan was further shortened into its most common form today, John.
What?
Is how much we've replaced old versions of the name with this.
Yohanan to John?
This more basic spelling. Take John Calvin, for example, the French religious reformer. He was born as Jehan Calvin, but has since had his name changed to what is known as today, as different forms of his name became more popular. Of course, that's only the beginning of the story. From England, John spread into nearby Cornwall as Joan, and into Wales as Ifan, which eventually became Evan, Yifan, Iwan, Sion, and Yanto. And then all of these versions made their way even further into...
What do Lucas country speak, bro? Ivan.
To Scotland, and John became Jan, which we now say is Ian, and Yoin. Oh, and yeah, I might not pronounce all of these even remotely correctly, so have fun laughing at me in the comments. Next door, in Ireland, John became Sean, or Sean, or Sean. Oh, and Shane. That means all of these names came...
How does Sean and Johan come...
from the single Yohanan, and similar things happened throughout Europe, each time yielding different variations specific to the language and dialects unique to the region. Going back to France, names like Johan and Jahan primarily became Jean, but also variations like Jeannot, Jan, Yohan, Yannick, and Yannick arose.
I've been hearing this a lot. Yannick, Yohan, Yan. This is literally one of my Muslim friends, like in my old essay, his name was Yohan.
Following this, Spain's John became Juan, but also each region within Spain also had their own way of using the name. In Aragon, for example, Juan became Chuan, while in the Basque, they got real creative and came up with names like Gani and Iban, and even Galicia got in on it with Joan. From Spain, however, the name eventually passed into Portuguese as João, Joane, and Joan, which eventually became João. Now,
João Felix. Oh.
First places for the original Yohanan to reach, which might make you think the names here would be most similar to it, but that also means it was Greece that had the most time to come up with alterations of the name, and now Ioannis has become Giannis, Gianni, Giannis, Giannis, Yanni, Giannis, and Gianni. But if the Greeks had a lot of time to mix things up, the Italians had almost the same amount of time, and Ioannis resulted in Giovanni, Gianni, and Gian. I think it's important to mention too that the names Nino and Vanni were originally nicknames derived from these names. Oh yeah, and of course Corsica produced its own form of the name too, in Giovanni. I already mentioned the Germans a little, but another interesting thing happened here. So far, all the shortenings have, for the most part, dropped the H part of the name, but the opposite started to happen here, where Johannes dropped its starting Joe, and the name Hannes came about. From Hannes, we got Hans and Han. Then, a bit further into the Netherlands, Hans was transformed into Hank, the same way how in England John became Jack. But perhaps the most unique derivations came from transplanting Johannes into the more Slavic Eastern European sphere. In countries like Russia or the Ukraine, the most common form of the name is definitely Ivan, but that doesn't mean other forms didn't arise as well. Jean, Hansa, Janez, and Jovan all became moderately typical names as well. In Albania, these names became Jin, Jani, Jean, and Jani. It was specifically the Lithuanians who gave us Jonas, while nearby Estonia came up with Juhan, Juho, Jano, Juk, and Janas. And trust me, Europe alone has produced many, many other variations. But they start getting real cool once you leave Europe. In the Congo, for example, John became John, which is actually...
That's crazy.
Real cool once you leave Europe. In the Congo, for example, John became
Congo, bro.
John, which is actually very similar to the Vietnamese version of the name, John. Yeah, I don't know if those sound
Vietnamese and Congo.
Which is actually very similar to the
How did he get there?
Vietnamese version of the name, John. Yeah, I don't know if those sound very different. And lastly, we have the United States, which for the most part hasn't altered the name too much, but they have started to experiment with multiple names to create new ones.
What kind of duo is that? Shit, I'm gonna go to Vietnam, bro.
For example, the combinations of the names Ray and Sean, which is originally an Irish form of the name John, has created the name Rashawn. Now, I'll be honest, I couldn't find exact numbers on how many people have most of these names, so this is speculation, but I'm willing to bet Yohanan and all of its derivations is at the very least comparable in size to the name Muhammad. Now, I'm very confident in this, not because of all the names I just mentioned, but because there are still two huge groups that I haven't mentioned. The first is last names. The last name Johnson, the son of John, is the second most common last name in the United States alone, and Jackson, which comes from the name Jack, which is usually a nickname for John, is the 13th.
I don't know, bro. The U.S., bro, most of the people have the same last name. Like, in Africa, it's like kind of different. Like, to find your last name is gonna be so different from everyone. Like, you probably, I don't know about Europe, to be honest. I don't know about Europe. And do you know what used to happen? You see, like, black people with, like, their names is, like, the same. Because, bro, like, the slave master thing, his family name was put to all his slaves. And literally, when they reproduce, they keep that name. Bro, you still not, like, it's kind of like, shit. Everybody almost got the same last name. So he had, like, 100 slaves, and they're males. When they reproduce, they keep that same last name, bro. It's, like, kind of crazy.
Most common. If we looked at all the last names, which also had originated from different derivations on first names, well,
to be honest, half of Portugal is Silva.
This video would be twice as long, but possibly even more important than last names, we haven't talked about women. Now, there are no real feminine versions of Muhammad really being used today, but the name Yohanan definitely has some. From the English name John comes Joan, Jane, Janet, Janet, and Jean. The Irish name Sean has become unisex lately, but has also given us names like Shauna and Siobhan, and other ones I'm not even going to try to pronounce. The Germanic Johannes has given us Joanna and Joanne. For our events, we have Ivana and Ivankas. From the name Hans, there's Hannah, but not Hannah, that's a different name actually. The Italian masculine Giovanni became Giovanna, Gianni became Gianna, and even the nickname
oh my days, what is happening?
Name Nino became Nina. And lastly, the Spanish name Juan created the name Juanita. Basically, versions
Juanita.
of the name Johannan are everywhere. Male, female, first or last names. But unless someone takes account of all of its different versions, which there are thousands of, we'll never know for sure if there's more Johannans or Muhammads in the world. Now, I was going to end this video with a great segue about how I don't have any patrons named John yet.
Alright, bro. W video, bro. W video. W video, bro. W. I didn't know, like, it was a lot. Like, I didn't know, but, like, W. Type in your, if you got a name, whatever, like, that's similar to that. Or give me, like, type in names in the comments and shit. Like, if it's similar. Type your shit.